For the better part of a decade, Shonen Jump has made it a priority to supplement their popular manga with high-quality anime adaptations, moving from long-running weekly anime to higher-quality seasonal shows. Ever since My Hero Academia, Shonen Jump has consistently received seasonal anime adaptations, usually from big-name studios and directors who do the source material justice, except you, my sweet summer child. They're quick to enter pre-production when it comes to adapting big hits in the magazine, as Shonen Jump knows that a good anime adaptation can catapult any manga into global superstardom. This is seen with titles like Demon Slayer and Jujutsu Kaisen, both of whom have surpassed over 100 million copies in circulation. Even titles that aren't as big like the Elusive Samurai and Undead Unluck received very high quality anime adaptations that were well received by the community at large. When I first read the early chapters of Sakamoto Days back in late 2020 and saw all the positive reception it received, I knew it had the potential to be an all-time Shonen Jump legend if it received the right anime adaptation. Although Sakamoto Days started off more as a slice-of-life action comedy following a now-retired legendary hitman as he tries to preserve the peaceful life he's created, manga Yuto Suzuki quickly found his groove and began leaning more into the action, which ended up being the greatest pivot ever. Sakamoto Days quickly went from a pretty good slice-of-life action manga to an action-packed thriller with incredible combat, to the point where I believe Sakamoto Days has some of the best drawn fights Shonen Jump has ever seen. The characters oozed swagger and intrigue, as each of them had a unique fighting style that was greatly expanded upon whenever they'd find themselves in physical altercations. There were bullet-bending snipers, deadly movie directors, invisible shenanigans, any kind of combat you can think of, Sakamoto Days had it. As the years passed by and Sakamoto Days progressed while growing its fan base within Japan and overseas, I was excitedly awaiting its anime adaptation to be announced. I grew even more hopeful when I saw the anime for Undead Unluck, whose manga came out earlier in 2020, and the Elusive Samurai, which came out after Sakamoto Days. I wasn't too worried about Sakamoto Days being done dirty since Demon Slayer got its anime when it was in its final arc, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't slightly concerned about the lack of announcements. Finally, in 2024, we received news that Sakamoto Days was going to be adapted by TMS. This was a little alarming considering TMS wasn't known for action anime, but if the TMS staff working on Sakamoto Days had the right director and the right vision, along with enough time, they'd be able to create the next Shonen Jump super sensation. Unfortunately, they had none of that. Fast forward to the end of the first core of Sakamoto Days, and the newest manga volume finds itself being outsold by Kagurabachi, a manga with less than 100 chapters and no anime adaptation in sight. Ouch. Before I begin, I just want to say, the animators themselves are never to blame for poor production and the final product being less than desirable. You've got to have a lot of love for animation to be in the anime industry in the first place, and I know that every animator that worked on Sakamoto Days worked their ass off to meet tight deadlines and get episodes shipped. I'm also not gonna act like this adaptation is downright horrendous. Trust me, I've seen horrid, and this is nothing close to it, but this is as mid as it can get, and given Shonen Jump's track record with anime recently, I think it's fair to desire a better adaptation, given the immense potential it has. Sakamoto Days ended up being a disappointment for manga readers due to how poorly its production was managed, and that's the fault of TMS and Shueisha and the production committee. Some people may say, well, we survived watching poor Naruto episodes back in 2009, so don't complain about Sakamoto Days. It isn't 2009. That was over 15 years ago. Plus, this isn't even a weekly show like Naruto was. Times have changed, and so have expectations given what Shonen Jump's been putting out recently. Funnily enough, Sakamoto Days did end up looking how I thought it would look like when I first saw the initial trailers and opening that were revealed, but not in a good way. The opening, despite having a banger song, felt pretty all over the place and didn't inspire much confidence considering all the weird shots in it. The first episode ended up being pretty strong, having an impressive action sequence when Shin and Sakamoto got to brawling. Based off of the first episode alone, I felt like this anime adaptation was going for a 90s to early 2000s Sunday morning cartoon kind of vibe, with scratch overlays being present in the composition, along with a particular style for the shadows. This style works excellently for early Sakamoto Days, which consists of Sakamoto minding his business in his convenience store in a quiet little town before some ruffian assassin pulls up and gets loaded by cough drops and discount stickers. The comedic dynamic between Sakamoto, Lu, and Shin was being handled well, and I particularly enjoyed how Sakamoto's desire to end Shin's life at times and his thoughts was portrayed. Unfortunately, things went off the rails as soon as episode 4, which had a level of outsourcing that would make Mappa blush. A staff member commented that certain scenes in episode 4 were only completed to a certain extent to meet tight deadlines. This raised a lot of red flags since Sakamoto Days should have been in production for quite a while given how big of a name it was within Shonen Jump and the potential it had to become a huge hit. TMS had bid on Sakamoto Days as early as 2021 and was decided as the studio to handle it, yet its production was already melting down by episode 4. The struggling production is especially present during action sequences, which feel hollow to say the least. When I read Sakamoto Days, there's a great sense of flow and rhythm in every single fight, no matter the setting, no matter who's fighting with what style. Suzuki does an excellent job of making every blow have immense impact, and I can feel how fast characters and objects are moving through the page via his paneling and layouts. The anime completely lacks this feeling, and what's left is speed lines and slow motion. So far in Sakamoto Days, very few of the punches or attacks have felt like they have any weight whatsoever. Most movements feel stiff, and I rarely felt any kind of hype while watching fights that I know I enjoyed in the manga. Instead of feeling like fluid combat that we've seen in anime like Dandadan, Sakamoto Days feels like pre-Wano One Piece or the average isekai that's present in each season. It doesn't feel like a high-quality Shonen Jump adaptation at all. At times, Sakamoto will launch a punch, land it, and then there's just a slow motion shot going over the punch before the aggressor goes flying. It doesn't have that level of impact or speed I felt from the manga, as if a lot of in-between frames were missing. This style of adapting fights isn't always horrible, and slow motion is present in a lot of other action anime, but for Sakamoto Days, it feels like the bulk of the fights are shown in this manner with a few spurts of fluid motion interspersed between them. This kind of adaptation would work wonderfully if Sakamoto Days stayed as a slice-of-life comedy that leaned more on the comedic aspect rather than the action. TMS chose to adapt Sakamoto Days when it was more on the slice-of-life side, which would explain why they thought it could be worked on alongside Dr. Stone and Detective Conan, which look a lot better than Sakamoto Days. It feels like TMS allotted their schedule based on Sakamoto Days not requiring as many frames as fight-filled anime like Chainsaw Man. Unfortunately, it seems like they quickly got out of their depth once Suzuki went full constant combat mode, introducing new weapons and combat styles as the story progressed. However, by then, the adaptation was set in stone, and the short-handed staff had to do their best with the tight schedule they had been given. You might wonder, didn't Jujutsu Kaisen have a horrible schedule during season 2? It still delivered movie-quality production every week. Well, TMS is not specialized in action anime like MAPPA, and it does not have the same production lines MAPPA has access to. The overwhelming talent working on JJK isn't comparable to Sakamoto Days. Director Masaki Watanabe said in an interview that Sakamoto Days' action scenes were a challenge as he's not used to directing such high-octane action that requires 2 to 3 times more frames than a typical production. He mentioned the struggle of gathering freelancers since they didn't have as much in-house talent present at the production from the beginning, which made it difficult to manage the quality of the work. This seems to be the first super action-heavy anime Watanabe has worked on, and you can really feel his vision for wanting Sakamoto Days to feel like a Sunday morning cartoon. While this works for the comedic aspects and gags of Sakamoto Days, it ends up negatively affecting any kind of tension felt in combat situations. Fights feel like they're played more for comedy than they are for showcasing Sakamoto and co.'s badassery in combat, and there still hasn't really been a sequence I've been wowed by at all. Sakamoto Days ended up being so popular without a manga in the first place because of its action and swagger, and the adaptation has pretty much whiffed on both of those aspects. Although I'm rarely that scared for Sakamoto and the crew despite them being in numerous life-threatening situations constantly in the manga, there's still a level of tension present and the villains remain terrifying. I never really felt that tension in the anime, especially with Kashima, who ended up feeling more like a goofball than the psycho he is. I genuinely believe Sakamoto Days could have been an all-time action anime if it received the same love as other Shonen Jump titles it ran alongside with. After seeing how much Cloverworks elevated the Elusive Samurai with its adaptation, I find myself looking at Sakamoto Days and wondering what could have been. It's far from the worst, but if this is the strongest season that it has to offer, then I'm afraid Sakamoto Days won't ever get that recognition it deserves. A lot of Japanese fans have absolutely despised the adaptation so far, calling for the director and studio to be changed, while questioning why a manga that got an adaptation this late ended up being so underwhelming. If you're an anime only that thoroughly enjoys Sakamoto Days, more power to you. I'm genuinely glad you're enjoying it week to week, and luckily for you, Core 2 is just around the corner. I hope the rest of the anime has a better schedule than the first batch of episodes, although given the timing of Core 2 and how close it is to Core 1, that may be an impossible ask. Plus, it's not even like the episodes coming out are bad. In fact, there are definitely some stronger, more enjoyable episodes in this season that showcase the potential of this adaptation if the staff had more time to work on it. The main goal of anime adaptations is to bring new viewers to the series, and if it's hooked you in, then it did its job. After this season wraps up, I definitely recommend picking up the manga though. If you like the action present in the anime, that dynamic choreography in the manga will have you clapping your hands. It's also super unfortunate that Sakamoto Days and Solo Leveling air on the same day. Like, Solo Leveling comes out and it looks like cinema every single week, filled with fluid, high-octane action, while Sakamoto Days, well, you've heard me complain enough.